I am a Freemason. I am a free and accepted Mason, if I may carry the matter to its full length, because that is what our Masonic brethren like to tell us, that they are free and accepted Masons. That is their style of putting it. Now I am a free and accepted Mason. I trust we all are. Those are the words of Charles Taze Russell, as spoken in 1913 at a lecture he gave in San Francisco at a Masonic Lodge. And in this video, I am going to be explaining why these words do not mean that Charles Taze Russell was a Freemason. Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Attic. And yes, as I've already explained, this video will be about Charles Taze Russell and claims that he was a Freemason. This video has been prompted by a number of comments I've been getting, not just recently, but actually over a long period of time. I'm going to read some of those comments to you. Ernie555 says, "The Borg are part of Masonry. Members are being programmed different rituals you don't want to know about since they're so disgusting." Another viewer says Freemasons are behind the curtain. That's where the billionaires or where the billions of dollars are going, I guess is what they're saying. They created it out of thin air and grabbing all the real estate dollars. Everything else is just a front, just another organization scamming people. Check out the similar verbiage. Charles Taze Russell was a Freemason. Then we have Minimus 1703. Our Masonic friends have it down very fine. I do not know where they got it so well. I have often wondered where they found out so many of the secrets of our high and accepted order of Masonry. That's another quote, an accurate quote from Charles Taze Russell. And Fit for a Firefight says, "No link. C.T. Russell is literally buried next to a Masonic pyramid. His grandfather was William Huntington Russell, the founder of the Skull and Bones. I am a free and accepted Mason. He can't be any clearer. You're a terrible researcher." So that last comment about me being a terrible researcher was on a video that I made 5 years ago on the topic of Jehovah's Witnesses and the supposed link with Freemasons. And the reason this particular viewer was apparently so agitated and annoyed was because I explain quite comprehensively in that video why I believe there is no link with Freemasons. But in this video, I want to focus on the specific question of whether Charles Taze Russell was a Freemason. And I think that this speech he gave in 1913 is actually very interesting to analyze. As it happens, I have a book in my collection which a viewer very kindly donated. Convention Report Sermons is the name of the book. I don't think this is an official, authentic Jehovah's Witness or Watchtower publication. I'm pretty sure this was published by the Bible students, because the Bible students are still a thing, would you believe it? Even in the 21st century, there are people who follow Charles Taze Russell and revere everything that he said and did. So this book actually contains a full transcript of the 1913 talk that he gave at the Masonic Lodge. I went through the entire talk. It's a very, very long-winded talk, and if I may say, extremely boring. You're welcome. I went through the whole thing just to see if I was missing something, just to see if there was maybe some kind of hint that he actually was a Freemason and he was just kind of playing with his audience. But I think once I've read some quotes, not just from that talk or sermon, but from elsewhere in his writings, I think we can put this matter to bed, quite frankly, in this video. So now let me read you with fuller context the part of the sermon that I started the video with. I am very glad to have this particular opportunity of saying a word about some of the things in which we agree with our Masonic friends, because we are speaking in a building dedicated to Masonry, and we also are Masons. I am a Freemason. I am a free and accepted Mason, if I may carry the matter to its full length, because that is what our Masonic brethren like to tell us, that they are free and accepted Masons. That is their style of putting it. Now, I am a free and accepted Mason. I trust we all are. But not just after the style of our Masonic brethren. We have no quarrel with them. I am not going to say a word against Freemasons. In fact, some of my very dear friends are Masons, and I can appreciate that there are certain very precious truths that are held in part by our Masonic friends. I have talked to them at times, and they have said, "How do you know about all of these things? We thought nobody knew anything about these things except those who had access to our very highest logic." Now, straight away, you can see some clues in that text or this quote indicating that Russell wasn't a Mason. Whoever's transcribed the talk has put free, as in Freemason, has put the word free in italics to emphasize that rather than saying, "I'm a Freemason," he's saying, "I am a free Mason." In other words, he's clearly speaking in an illustration. He's talking about Masonry or being Masons in a Christian sense. That's the entire gist of the talk. And just in that brief quote, he talks about we have no quarrel with them. He's talking about Masons as being them rather than, I'm a Mason. He's very clearly delineating between himself and his followers and Freemasons as a separate entity. We'll continue. I said that I had been in conference with the great master workman, the Lord himself, and I have secret information through the Holy Spirit and guidance in respect to what the Bible says, and that contains all the truth, I believe, on every subject. And so, if we talk to our Masonic friends about the temple and its meaning, and about being good Masons, and about the Great Pyramid, which is the very emblem they use, and what the Great Pyramid signifies, our Masonic friends are astonished. One who had been a Mason a long time recently bought a lot of books that had the Great Pyramid discussed, and sent them to, I am sure, 1,000 Masons. He paid for them and sent them out at his own expense. He wanted the Masons to see something about the Great Pyramid. He knew they were greatly interested in that. But we are not going to discuss the Great Pyramid this afternoon. We are going to discuss free and accepted Masonry, the Bible Masonry, my dear friends. So he's making it clear there that, again, not only is there this distinction between him and Freemasons who are interested in his teachings, particularly since he's using pyramidology, which is something he shares with Freemasons. His pyramidology, like many of his teachings, was borrowed from other thinkers of his time, some of whom were Freemasons, but that doesn't make him a Freemason. And he's spelling out towards the end of that quote that this talk is basically going to be his lecture on Bible Masonry. He's referring to the Christian as a Mason in a metaphorical sense. We'll move on in the talk. Although I have never been a Mason, I have heard that in Masonry they have something which very closely illustrates all of this. It is in riding the goat, etc. And the Bible calls for the goat, you know. The Bible tells you that your goat, which you have to ride more or less every day, is your own flesh. Our Masonic friends have it down very fine. I do not know where they got it so well. I have often wondered where they found out so many of the secrets of our high and accepted order of Masonry. Isn't it interesting? Those words will hopefully be familiar from that YouTube comment that I read to you earlier. Isn't it interesting how the person who left that comment has selectively picked out some words that make Russell sound like a Mason, even though those words are almost immediately after the statement, the emphatic statement, I have never been a Mason. You know, that's quite disingenuous. That's what's called quote mining. And quite frankly, it's just the sort of shady practice that Jehovah's Witnesses employ when it comes to misquoting scientists or misquoting Bible scholars to get their views across. I think it's quite sad, if I can just be frank for a moment, how some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses get so fixated on this issue of Freemasonry and the occult that they're willing to bend and twist the facts and bend and twist quotes by Charles Taze Russell to make him say things to support what they want him to say. Isn't that a shame that they do that? Anyway, I think straight away there we can put the matter to bed. He's literally said, I have never been a Mason. He goes on to say later in the lecture, so then I repeat what Jesus said about the terms of membership. I do not know if we are all members of this order or not. You know our order is so secret, we cannot know each other always. Is not that wonderful? I find that it is so with Masons also. Many Masons shake hands with me and give me what I know is their grip. They don't know me from a Mason. Something I do seems to be the same as Masons do. I don't know what that is, but they often give me all kinds of grips, and I give them back. Then I tell them I don't know anything about it, except just a few grips that have come to me naturally. So not only does Charles Taze Russell say, I have never been a Mason, he also says, I don't know anything about it, meaning the secret handshakes, the rituals that Masons do. So even though you could say this talk, this lecture that he gives in San Francisco is very self-indulgent and almost teasing the audience at times with this idea of Christians being Masons, it's full of lines that can be taken out of context, and really that's something that he could have been a little bit more responsible with, this potential for his words to be taken out of context. He wasn't careful. If anything, he was quite reckless in this long, rambling, verbose, self-indulgent talk about Bible Masonry. He did sort of make a rod for his own back to some extent. But let's be clear, he denied ever having been a Mason in this talk, and he also said that he doesn't know anything about it. Actually, if you read the talk, it seems he does know a few things about Masonry, but he has disavowed in this talk being a Mason. And there's a good reason why he would do that if we look at his earlier writings. So I'm going to now read you a quote from the Watchtower of 1895, June 15th, in which it says, or Charles Taze Russell writes, "We note also that the order of Freemasons, if judged by its past history, has some secret objects or scheme, more than fraternity and financial aid in time of sickness or death. And so far as we can judge, there is a certain amount of profane worship or mummery connected with the rites of this order and some others, which the members do not comprehend, but which in many cases serves to satisfy the cravings of the natural mind for worship, and thus hinders it from seeking the worship of God in spirit and in truth, through Christ, the only appointed mediator and grand master. In proportion as such societies consume valuable time in foolish, senseless rites and ceremonies, and in substituting the worship of their officers and the use of words and symbols which have no meaning to them for the worship of God in his appointed way through Christ, and according to knowledge and the spirit of a sound mind, in that proportion these societies are grievous evils, regardless of the financial gains or losses connected with membership in them. He's literally said that the Freemasons, or membership of the Freemasons, is a grievous evil. And he said that the rites and ceremonies are, quote, foolish and senseless. This was Charles Taze Russell writing in the 1895 Watchtower. I have another quote for you, which I actually have in my collection. This is volume 6 of Studies in the Scriptures, titled The New Creation. This is another great quote, and we're building a picture here of a man who wasn't consistent in his messaging. Once we take into account everything that he said about Freemasonry leading up to his visit to the Masonic Lodge in San Francisco in 1913. And incidentally, this copy of The New Creation is actually a 1913 print. The book itself was first published in 1904, but this is a 1913 copy of The New Creation. So this was printed the year that Russell went to visit or gave a talk at the Masonic Lodge in San Francisco. As we understand the matter, for instance, the Freemasons, Oddfellows, Knights of Pythias, etc., perform certain rites and ceremonies of a religious kind. Let it be understood that we are not waging any warfare upon those who hold membership in these various orders, even as we are not waging warfare against the various sectarian religious systems. We place upon one level all of those which have any religious ceremonies, teachings, etc., and consider them all as parts of Babylon, some quarters or wards of which are cleaner and others less clean, but all, nevertheless, full of confusion, error, contrary to the divine intention, as displayed in the organization of the primitive church and the instructions by word and example given to it by the inspired founder and his 12 apostles. We admonish the new creation to have nothing whatever to do with any of these semi-religious societies, clubs, orders, churches, but to come out from amongst them, and be ye separate, and touch not the unclean thing. Their things, their worship, their teachings, their doctrines are unclean to us, though they may not be unclean to themselves. The eyes of our understanding have been opened, and now to us all things appear in a new light, so that things which we once loved now we hate, and things which we once hated now we love. So, not only did Charles Taze Russell describe membership of Freemasonry as a grievous evil, not only did he describe the rites and ceremonies of Freemasonry as foolish and senseless, he's here describing Freemasonry as being unclean. He's describing it as part of Babylon, And he's telling people to get out of Freemasonry, essentially. Get out of anything that we're determining to be Babylon, including Freemasonry. I don't know how he could be more emphatic about his feelings, negative feelings about Freemasonry. But here's where we learn a little bit about the man, Charles Taze Russell, and what a slimy snake oil salesman he was. Because, again, the book I've just been reading from was a 1904 book, but this particular copy was printed in 1913. He rolls up at the Masonic Lodge in San Francisco, and here's part of what he said in his speech at the Masonic Lodge in San Francisco, bearing in mind everything he's just said in his earlier publications about Freemasonry. I am not saying anything against the earthly Knights Templar. You can use your own judgment. You know I never advise one way or another respecting what things we shall eat or drink, or wherewithal we shall be clothed. I merely advise how we come into harmony with God according to the Bible, and each man and woman must use his or her own judgment respecting the will of God. If you think it is the will of God you should join the Oddfellows, and don't feel you are oddfellow enough in becoming a follower of the Lord, go and join the Oddfellows. If you feel you want to become a member of the free and accepted order of Masonry, and do not feel free and Masonic enough as a follower of Christ, God bless you. Use your judgment. That is yours to decide, not mine. What a slimy character, because he's now talking in front of an audience that would have included a number of Freemasons. It's their building, and I'm sure there would have been many Freemasons in attendance. And now that he knows that he's got them in the room, he's not going to speak his true feelings and say that Freemasonry is a grievous evil and an unclean thing, or that its rites and rituals are foolish and senseless. He's not going to say you should get out of it because it's unclean. All of a sudden he's like, oh, well, if you want to join, you should join. That's what a sleazy, slimy man he was. A different message depending on the situation, apparently. That was the sort of tactic he would use. And isn't it interesting that the organization that came to be built up around him employs the same double talk and double standards and charlatanry, quite frankly. So I hope you don't mind me going down this route of just completely laying to bed, hopefully, once and for all, this idea that Charles Taze Russell was a Freemason. One thing that people jump up and down about is the fact that his grave is near a Masonic Lodge. So Russell's grave, there's a tombstone, and there used to be a pyramid structure, which, for reasons Watchtower will know, they actually removed it, which I think is quite sad because that's part of history. But in any case, Russell's grave was situated near a Masonic Lodge, and people would jump up and down about that and say, well, there you go. You know, he has to be buried next to a Masonic Lodge. Well, actually, if you do some digging, you find out that it was actually 1996 that the lodge was built next to the graveyard. So it was 80 years after Russell's death and burial that this lodge just coincidentally was built next door. So there's absolutely nothing to make a fuss of in that regard. Actually, if you really want to drill down into this subject, there's an excellent JW Facts article on the whole issue of whether Russell was a Freemason. I will put a link in the description so you can check it out. But finally, for anyone who is annoyed at me bringing these truths to light, or really holds a candle for the idea of either Russell being a Freemason or the organization being connected in some way with Freemasonry, I would just ask you, as I asked 5 years ago in my other video about Freemasonry, what's the big deal? What is the big deal? Freemasons, bless them, are a bit of a mad group. It's a boys-only club. They wear silly aprons. They do silly rituals. And it's all about going through the degrees and having some kind of hierarchy in private that they perhaps don't have in public. So you can be important as a Freemason, even though you may not be that important in real life. That's all it is. It's nothing connected with Satan. It's not like Freemasons own the world. I think so much of this bizarre fixation with Freemasonry stems from, quite frankly, conspiracy theories and this whole idea of a new world order and the Illuminati and lizard people. And honestly, if Freemasons are what we need to be worried about, these guys that walk around with silly aprons that resemble an email icon, okay, fair enough. If that's what you want to believe, then fine. But as I argued in my original video of 5 years ago, those of us who care about the harms and abuses of Jehovah's Witnesses have far more important and far more pressing issues to be discussing than potential links with Freemasons. Even if Charles Taze Russell had said, I am actually a member of the Freemasons, maybe you should all consider joining too. Even if he'd said that, which he didn't, there still wouldn't be much to write home about. So what? In his spare time, he liked to wear an apron and walk in these bizarre patterns and do these silly rituals. I mean, it would have been amusing, but it still wouldn't have been as important and as pressing to talk about as the industrial scale cover-up of child abuse by Jehovah's Witnesses, the shunning, the talks against higher education, the domestic violence, all of these issues which are far more important to talk about. So again, I just hope I've put this issue to bed. I'm sure there's still going to be some who are angry at me for saying all this. I'm bracing myself for an onslaught of angry comments. All I would say is the information's there if you want to look at it in the organization's own publications. Let's not quote mine. Let's not cherry pick the same way Watchtower does to try and make a dead man say something that we want him to say. Let's just be honest when it comes to our research and let the facts lead us to the correct conclusion rather than inventing a conclusion and trying to make the facts fit. So that's all I really have to say on this subject. Hopefully there will be no third video on links with Freemasonry. I hope you found this information useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.
Oh,